Thank you all for coming back. We have some more Rebus puzzles to re-engage ourselves this afternoon. So let's start here. Small talk. It is talk written very small. This one. Get up and go. Here. Jack in the box. Too little, too late. Deep in thought and Robin Hood. Has the same strategy there, but Robin Hood. Right. So hopefully this morning as we were exploring our garden of curiosity. Oh, you're going to need some support on that? So here we go. It's like Rob Hood and Robin Hood. Yep. So hopefully this morning as we were exploring our garden of curiosity, you found some things that you maybe didn't know that you were interested in. And that's, I think, precisely the type of curiosity, then exploration that we want to encourage in our students. So that as they're kind of looking at these things, whether it's traffic patterns or the lack of pattern within kind of the breakdown system of that we saw in Beijing, or we're looking at things like Wonderopolis, or we're exploring any of the things that we saw this morning, that they begin to say, huh, I did not know that I was interested in that. I'd like to learn more about it. Another kind of seed that I'll plant out there for you to check out comes from my good friend Ian Bird. He blogs at birdseed.com, but he also has a free weekly email newsletter called puzzlements.co. It's a weekly dose of curiosities and puzzlements. What happens is that every Friday afternoon at noon, then you will receive an email that has 5 interesting links on it. A lot of things he pulls kind of from The Kids Should See This and a number of other sites that are really good aggregators of that type of curiosity online. He just puts it into a collection of saying, here are the 5 things that I handpicked this week that I think that you might want to share with your students. I'm going to give you kind of a couple of examples of things that he has pulled from that are not necessarily videos, but just some interesting graphs or charts. So take a look at this one. And then tell somebody what you think about this graph. What comes to mind? Anybody have a question about this? Yeah, pretty. If you don't have a question, then you probably aren't paying attention to the graph. So what are some of the questions that you have? Yeah, Tracy. Who is stockpiling all of this cheese? Why are they stockpiling it? I Yeah, I thought that the USDA was giving away all of this cheese. Why is there, this excess of, what is this, like 1 billion pounds of cheese? Um, where is this cheese stored? I want to know, like, what kind of cheese is it? Is it all the same type of cheese, like the USDA cheese, or is this, yeah, is it like, is it in slab form? So many questions that you could this was Source USDA. It was featured in a blog entry that was on the Bloomberg website. Just saying, FYI, people, FYI. Here's another one that I'll show you. It's a pictograph. Take a moment to look at that. Yeah, these are Krispy Kreme donuts. Yeah, so this is so what this represents is the amount of sugar in each of these supposedly healthy foods, expressed as Krispy Kreme donuts. So here we have orange juice, Yoplait yogurt. This is vitamin water. This is a salad from the California Pizza Kitchen. And then this is like a juice, an Odwalla superfood. So, yeah, 5. It is, and so that's I think that's really kind of where we need to get to. It's like, well, then what's the difference between regular like sugar, bad sugar, and natural sugar? Um, Certainly, no one would say that, oh, well, we shouldn't be eating fruits, um, but fruits also contain sugar. So it's a lot of different ways that we can begin to look at that information, and more things that we can ask questions about, and things that we can be curious about. One of the things that I also want to encourage you to do with your students is help them develop their intense and interesting interests. Again, as our kids enter schools, they're full of interesting things that they want to explore. We, I think, need to do as much as we can to provide opportunities for them to explore some of those interests. I'm going to show you a short little clip here. Keep my fingers crossed that it's going to work. This is my friend Piper. Piper is going to tell you about her intense and interesting interest.
I'm interested in Pluto.
What do you love about Pluto?
The thing I love about Pluto, I don't really love it. I just think that it should be a planet, and I don't get why people say it's not a planet, but I believe Pluto is a planet.
Do you learn about it in school at all?
Sometimes it comes up in science class. Most of the time when it does that, it's always like the dwarf planets are blah 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 and Pluto, and I'm like, that's not true. I believe in Pluto. Pluto is a planet. Woo! It's such a cosmic injustice.
Which is terrible.
It's such a cosmic injustice. Now, I think that this clip of Piper really helps us see this difference between what might be a student's interest and what they might be passionate about. I don't think anybody here is going to deny that Piper is passionate about Pluto. Although in the beginning she says, well, I'm not really interested in Pluto, except that I really think that Pluto needs to be a planet. So as I've kind of been, watching this video and using it, I've come to the realization that Piper is perhaps interested in planets. She's interested in Pluto. But I think what she's passionate about is that cosmic injustice. That she's really passionate about rooting for the underdog. She's like, it was a planet and now it's not a planet. Like, how is that even possible? And so I would say that she's probably passionate about a variety of things, especially that are related to that injustice that's going on within the world. I think that we also have to really help our kids figure out what it is that they are interested in. Now, one way that we can go about doing this is to simply ask them what they're interested in. What are you interested in? But for many of our kids, especially many of our gifted kids, they will say, I am interested in everything. I want to know everything that there is to know about that. So we have to start helping them kind of narrow some of those interests down so that they, over the course of a lifetime, you can learn a lot about a lot of different things. But what is it that they want to learn about today or this week or in this grading period or the time that we have with them? An activity that my wife and I developed as part of this book that we did on using the school enrichment model with technology centered around this activity that we saw a teacher in the Wilmington area use during the month of March. What she did was to take sort of the March Madness brackets and use that for students' interests. So if you use the link that's down there at the bottom, bit.ly/sem-tech-interest-bracket, there's a Google Doc that you can make a copy of. It's simply a spreadsheet that has an interest bracket for 8 interest, 16 interest, 32 interest, and 64 interest. The idea is that you would first have your students brainstorm, list out fluently as many different interest areas or topics that they might be able to come up with, and however long it is that you give them. They can then take those interests, put them into the bracket, and have their interests sort of battle against each other. Once they get down to sort of that final 4, then those are probably things that they're more passionate about than just sort of that fleeting interest. that they might have. The other piece that's sort of even a response that you might get from your students is that um, they might say that they are interested in nothing, and that's I think pretty sad. We have to help them, and these students in particular, understand that there are a lot of things that they could be interested in. I think with looking at this kind of garden metaphor that we've been playing around with this morning, that we can help them develop those interests. The other piece that I really wanted to kind of talk about or touch on a little bit here before we move on to our afternoon activity is kind of the difference between being a know-it-all, which is where many of our kids want to go. They want to show you and tell you how smart it is that they are, and they think that they can learn everything. Instead of focusing on and even celebrating kind of that know-it-allness, I think that we need to change their mindset and their frame of reference and say, maybe I don't know all of the answers, because that would be humanly impossible, but maybe I can learn whatever it is that I'm wondering about. So help your kids transition from being a know-it-all to being a learn-it-all. Now, the way that we, I think, can do that is to look at the world with these new eyes. I love this quote from Marcel Proust, who said that the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Again, as we think about those kids as they enter our classrooms, they're looking at the world with new eyes. As we think about this from the perspective of a 4 or 5-year-old, everything around them is brand new. Yet as adults, we tend to see things through the same old eyes. One activity that I've been kind of engaged in for the past few years now at this point, as this project that my good friend David Peterson started up called Carpet Diem. I love a good pun. And so Dave Peterson, Ian Bird and I, we travel around a lot and do a lot of consulting. And wherever you go, there are interesting carpets in hotels and conference centers and schools. This is, quite an interesting random pattern that is on this floor and here. So we started just taking pictures of carpets and posting them to Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag CarpetDiem. It has forced me to look at the world around me with new eyes. Now, every place that I go, one of the first things that I look at is the carpet, because it's focusing my direction and attention in some new location. So this afternoon we're going to play a game. This is what we are going to do. We're going to use an app called Goose Chase. I'm seeing some people that have getting pretty excited that have used this before, maybe. So you're going to download the app. At least one person on your teams are going to have to have that installed. Everybody can install it, but we just need at least one person to do that. So you're going to install that. You can break yourselves up into any teams in any way that you want. We can have up to 5 teams. So we could have 3 teams, 2 teams, 5 teams. It doesn't matter to me. So you're going to download the Goose Chase app and install it. You're then going to decide which team it is that you're on. I put some Lego people out earlier today. You can choose to group yourselves in that way. If you're on Team Ariel, you're all going to work together. If you're on Team Buzz, you're all going to work together. Team Alice, however it is that you want to divide yourselves up. The password for those teams, for everyone, is curious. I wanted to make it as easy as possible. You're going to choose a team that you're going to be on, and you're going to enter in that password. I'm going to change our start time, or our end time, because I'm looking to see what time it is right now. The game name is TFI Curiosity Scavenger Hunt, I think. Or no, it's TFI Curiosity. I just changed it. there are 20 different things that you are going to be looking for and doing as a part of the scavenger hunt. There's most of them you can do in this building. Maybe a couple you have to go outside for. But we will have from now until 2:15. So find or do as many of the things that are on the list. So the goose chase, the sort of the behind the scenes piece looks like. You get to create any type of mission that you want. All the ones that we set up here for you today are all photograph missions, like you have to take a picture or video. You can also set up, if you insert a new, you can do a new photo or video mission. You can even have a text mission, so that they have to just enter in words, like a narrative response. There's also a GPS mission. So if you wanted, like your students or whoever was participating in the game to go to a specific, welcome back. If you wanted them to go to a specific geographic location, then you could put in the GPS coordinates, and the only way that they could earn points was by going to that spot. And so if you were like on a field trip kind of a thing, or if you wanted to set up like a goose chase city thing that they could do as a family, then that would be kind of an option for there. They have some missions that they've already put together, as well as then any mission that you create then goes into your collection of past missions that you have used. So I'm using the educator version, which is free. If you sign up with a .edu email address, then you can join the education version. With the education version, you can have 5 teams in any one game. Beyond 5 teams, if you want to pay for the educator premium version, I think you can expand that out to 10 teams. And I think that's $50 a year. They have a corporate version, which is ridiculously expensive. It was originally created for businesses and kind of corporate events. And like for that level, the number of teams is much larger, but they also charge $1,000 per game. Yep, so they have a game library. So you can see and search through. Right. So here's a few that they put together: social studies review, creative ELA vocabulary review, professional development, microeconomics, a syllabus hunt, medieval China. So you can see what other people have done and created as a part of that. Your question was about starting and stopping. So you can manually do that, manually start and stop, or you can do it automatic. What I did was to create an automatic version so that it would start at some point after lunch and then would run until 2:15. You can decide how long or how short it is that you want it to be. You guys were generally pretty swift with your responses, so it worked out really well. From the designer standpoint, like on the back end, then I can see this is the activity feed. So as you were capturing photos, I could see all of the things sort of rolling in like a Twitter or Instagram feed that were coming in there. So that's one way to look at it. You can also look at it by teams. So here are each of the different teams and the submissions that you put in. So if I wanted to see what Team Buzz Lightyear was doing and their 20 different responses, then I've got them collectively. I find that it's kind of the most interesting or useful view is looking at it by the submission pieces, so that you're looking at each of the challenges and what was submitted for that. And so you can really see how other teams solve those problems. For example, with this one, with a bright idea, we had 2 teams, it looks like, that found an actual light bulb or a light source that they went and stood under. Team Buzz Lightyear and R2-D2 were finding pictures or representations or creating a representation of a light bulb to go and stand under. Again, can play pretty fast and loose with what the directions are within each of those missions. So let me kind of take another example here and look at so so we've got different poems that were created. Um, like some of you actually got inside of the bathtub to take the picture versus just taking a picture of the tub. Um, and then this one's always pretty interesting. I like using this one with the goose, where you went and found pictures of geese, um, either in book form, um, on a computer. You have to get kind of creative because you never know when you're gonna like find like a goose out in the wild. They are not necessarily super predictable uh, in that regard. So, general thoughts about Goose Chase? Questions about Goose Chase or how you might use it within your classroom? I wasn't sure how that was going to work. I realized this was like my original plan, and then I realized last night as I was thinking about it, I was like, I have never been here before, so I don't know what they're going to be able to do, and I want to try and have some things that are specific to the location. Um, and so I had kind of a plan B. I'll go over really briefly plan B, what that was. And then once I got here and I saw, like, you're adventurous, outgoing people, let's give them something, active to do. I went and scouted some things out during lunch so that you could have that as an activity. This is a session that features technology, but technology has not necessarily been the focal point, except, of course, when the video wouldn't play, and then it became very much a focal point. Goose Chase was something that you got out and saw the world around you. We were using technology, but hopefully technology wasn't the focal point of what it was that we were doing. As I said in the beginning of the day, that I think that technology really works best when it kind of gets out of our way and it provides for this seamless experience. This idea, this notion of forgetting the technology comes from John Lasseter, who was one of the co-founders of Pixar Animation. John Lasseter is often asked by young people of how they become computer animators. Like, how do I get a job at Pixar when I grow up? And one of his pieces of advice that he almost always gives, and there's a number of YouTube clips out there in which you can see him saying this, he almost always begins by saying, if you want a job at Pixar or as a computer animator, the first thing that you need to do is forget the technology. It's like the technology is going to change every day, every year. If you are only focused on learning how this one tool works, you will never be successful as a computer animator. It's like what you need to do is to have a wealth of experiences. You need to understand how characters are developed, how to tell a good story. You also need to understand how art and design work. Like, do you know how to draw? Do you know how color theory works? Do you know how to put all of those pieces together to do something that's going to be effective and meaningful? Another kind of piece related to this, this idea of forgetting the technology and looking inside the world of Pixar and what it is that they do, comes from this fantastic book called Creativity Incorporated, or Overcoming the Unseen Forces That Stand in the Way of True Inspiration. This is written by Ed Catmull along with Amy Wallace. Ed Catmull is the other half of the Pixar Animation Studios. He's now the president of Disney Animation, so he oversees all of Disney's animation. But it was him and John Lasseter that had this crazy idea that they would create a full-length computer-animated motion picture, which happened just over 20 years ago now at this point, with the idea of that first film being Toy Story. Prior to that, people kind of thought that they were crazy. Like, what would that even look like, a computer-animated film? Like, who's going to go see that? And now, if we look at the 20 years since then, some of the top grossing films of the past 20 years all are computer animated films. He talks a lot about kind of overcoming the problem of this blank canvas. And he really points out that ideas do not exist in isolation, that they're part of building on ideas that people have already had before. He also really talks in the book Creativity Incorporated about the importance of failure. He says that failure isn't a necessary evil. In fact, it isn't evil at all. Instead, it is a necessary consequence of doing something that is new. Now, if we think about the world of creativity within Pixar, within Disney, within leading companies and corporations, and we contrast that with this fear of failure that we see within schools, we see that those are two very different worlds. Where we're in a school or an educational setting, failure is like the worst thing that could happen. You know, for many kids, not making 100 on a test is the end of the world. Like, oh, what do you mean I didn't make an A? Like, how is that even possible? Like, my self-worth is nothing now. So we have to help them kind of get beyond this and realize that it's important to make mistakes, but it's also important to learn from them. One of the guiding principles of the Pixar Corporation is something that they call the Brain Trust. The Brain Trust was this group of individuals that came together during the making of Toy Story, the first computer animated film. And what they did was to bring this group together to talk about all of the problems that they were running into and how it was that they were going to collectively solve them. One of the things that's most important about this group of people is that they all trust one another. They trust one another completely. And so they know that even though they may have very lively and heated discussions, at the end of the day, they are not going to become blood-sworn enemies. That they are in it to make the best possible product that they possibly can. They have this idea that regardless of what it is that you produce or bring to the Brain Trust, you are not your idea. So you might pitch an idea for a story or for a new film, and the rest of the Brain Trust could completely rip it apart and tell you how absolutely horrible it is and why it will never work. But none of those comments are personal. For many of our students, when we give criticism or feedback, they take it personally, and it's not. So they have to separate themselves from their ideas and from the work. Pixar has a philosophy that they like to run their company with, which is listed here. Number one, they get great creative people. Two, they bet big on them. They give them enormous leeway and support, and they provide them an environment in which they can get honest feedback from everyone at every level. So it's this open community of candor. Now, I really like this word candor a lot because it is much more refined and sophisticated than the word just honesty. If we're looking at candor, then we're talking about that state of quality or being a frank, open, sincere in speech or expression. And we have to work with our students to give them candid feedback on what it is that they're working on and realizing and helping them realize that they are not perfect in everything that they do. Catmull is very forthcoming in saying that early on, all of their movies suck. And I think that it's really important to phrase it that way. It's like, they are horrible, and they would never see the light of day. If we put out our first idea into the theaters, we would not be a successful company. We would be out of business long, long ago. But for many of our students, they think that the first time that they do something, that represents their best work. And that's simply not the case. Instead, they fall into this trap of perfectionism. They see something, they receive that early praise early on, not necessarily for putting forth a lot of effort. For many of our bright kids, things come really easy to them, and they receive a tremendous amount of praise for doing things that require little or no work on their part. They get this mistaken identity or notion that to be smart means that you do not work hard, and that people who are not smart, they have to work really hard. So if I'm working hard, I might not be smart. When they fall into this trap of perfectionism, and they start encountering things that are a little difficult for them, maybe things that are a little bit challenging, maybe receiving some candid feedback, they start making a lot of excuses about why they can't do things, or they start procrastinating and coming up with all of these very creative reasons of why it is that they're not doing the work that you provided for them. If we don't overcome or break that pattern of procrastination, then it can ultimately lead to paralysis in the students, so that they are so afraid to do anything, of making a mistake, that they will never even begin something. So let's look for ways to support them, look for ways to allow them to explore, and to provide them some challenges. We don't always need to have them think outside of the box. Instead, sometimes we need to have them thinking inside of the box, or utterly destroying the box altogether. So, two very kind of different approaches to that. When we're thinking inside of the box, we're working within those creative constraints. Catmull talks about this in the important role that it plays within Pixar. And he says that imposing limits can encourage a creative response. You always are going to have limited time and resources. And if you can work within a structure that's in place, then it might actually increase the creativity of a response. Now, if I gave you kind of an open assignment, and I said, I want you to go out and, after today's session, you're going to create some type of product that represents curiosity. And that's all that I said. Many of you might start asking questions of like, well, what does he really want us to do? What does that mean? How are we going to be evaluated on that? And you would get into that trap of not even knowing where to begin. Now, if I gave you some constraints around that and said, I want you to go and compose a poem that represents curiosity, or I want you to go and take a collection of 10 photographs that show curiosity in action, you suddenly are being creative in a way that you might not have thought about originally. And so it's forcing that creativity in one direction. One way that we can go about doing this is an activity that I've been doing now probably for about 10 years. I call it Flickr 5 frames because I really like alliteration a lot. And so it's also fun to say 3 F words right in a row and have a perfectly good reason for doing that. It does not involve Flickr in any sort of way. Flickr happens to be where I found this idea. It was part of a visual storytelling group. About 10 years ago at this point, I was saying, I want to do something on digital storytelling. What have other people done? I want to look at ways that we can use photography to better tell stories. And so I found this photo group on Flickr, in which students or creators would take 5 pictures. Each of these 5 photos, or 5 frames, has a separate or unique purpose. So I'm going to show you what each photo stands for, or should represent. And I'm also going to show you an example, and then there will be one final slide that has all 5 of them together. So in our first photo, we're going to establish characters and location. Okay. Establishing characters and location. By the way, I wish that I had taken these photographs. I did not. I did find them as part of the that visual storytelling group on Flickr. So here's photo number 1. Character and location. So who is our character here? The egg. And anybody know who this egg might be? Humpty Dumpty. And where is Humpty Dumpty located? Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Okay. Second photo. Create a situation of possibilities of what might happen. Okay, we had our characters in setting, characters in location. Well, now we have the situation of what might happen. Well, we know how the nursery rhyme goes. Sat on a wall, he had a great fall. So he's teetering on the edge, he's now falling. Photo number 3, we're going to involve them in the situation. So we had characters, location, we had a situation, and now they're involved in the situation. So here we see Humpty falling very rapidly towards the ground below. Photo number 4. build to probable outcomes. So how does this go? Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. So here we have Humpty, the king's horses, the king's men, the super glue, not putting it back together again. Poor Humpty. But this is called flicker 5 frames and not flicker 4 frames. So the fifth photo is going to have a logical but surprising ending. Here's our dark twist in which the king's men have Humpty for breakfast. Again, our 5 pieces. Pretty straightforward. It's kind of the way that a story is told or put together. But by having students take photographs instead of writing that out, they're still creating a narrative. They're still telling a story, but they're doing it in a more visual way. All right, so let's close out by talking a little bit about kind of creating some experiences by telling better stories within the lessons that we're providing for our students in the classroom. I want you to go with me back to the year 1977. We already talked about 1977 being that pivotal moment that Star Wars was introduced to the world. 1977 was also the year that my family went to Walt Disney World for the first time. Now, I read all about it at that point, and my mom had written off the brochures because we didn't have the internet back in the day, and so you had the maps and all the information, and I was like, okay, more than anything else that I want to experience is that I want to see and ride Space Mountain. Still to this day, walking in the park into Tomorrowland, as you see it sort of rising above the Florida's marshland that's out there. It's just a beautiful thing. You feel like, wow, this is the world of tomorrow. This is really gonna happen. And so, we're transported to this spaceport where we get the idea or the feeling of what it might be like to travel to another star system or to go visit another planet. Now, it was probably about 4 years ago now at this point, through my position on the board of directors for the National Association for Gifted Children, developed some relationships with folks that work at the Disney Youth Education Series programs. The Disney Yes programs, these are primarily field trip opportunities that teachers can take their kids on into the Disney parks to learn about, mostly about kind of STEM-based education type stuff. As I was first learning about some of the Yes programs, I learned that there was this unit of instruction all about physics and how they employed force and motion throughout the parks. More than anything else, I wanted to experience what that session was really all about, because I knew that it involved Space Mountain, my number one favorite attraction of all times. And so what we got to do, my wife and I went down and we visited our good friend Katie Curcio, and she took us on the tour. We got to work with see kids actually going through the program. And so with the one that involved Space Mountain, first they learned about force and motion and how roller coasters are built, and they had kind of put together a Connects roller coaster outside in front of Space Mountain. And then we got to go in. Now, most of the programs for kids happen before the parks open, which is pretty awesome because there is nobody there at all, and you never get to see the parks when they are not quite show ready as a typical guest. So we get to go in, and after the kids have learned about how roller coasters work and how Space Mountain works, then they got to experience Space Mountain. But they got to experience Space Mountain in a way that no other guest gets to experience it. We got to ride Space Mountain with the lights on. Now, I had heard about this, and I was super excited, and I really wanted to do it because I wanted to see, because nobody else gets to do that. So we get on. It's really ugly. very rickety. We rode it and got off. And I kind of looked around and all the kids were like, had this long look on their face. I had a long look on my face. It's like, what happened? That was really incredibly boring. And one kid even said, why did you break Space Mountain? What's wrong with it? Like, you slowed it down. So they asked them questions like, well, how big do you think the biggest hill is? Turns out the biggest hill is about 7.5 feet tall. How fast does it go? It goes about 30 miles an hour. Does not really have a whole lot of G-forces that it pulls as an attraction. As a matter of fact, the Goofy Barnstormer ride, like the kids' roller coaster, has a bigger hill, goes faster, and pulls more G-force on the attraction. Yet, when you're on Space Mountain, you have no idea what's going on. So they talked to the kids about, well, what makes this a ride with the lights on versus what makes it an attraction? And how can we make this into an attraction? And this one young boy said, you could turn the lights out. That'd be a great start. And they're like, yeah, so tell us more about that. What do you love about Space Mountain? And then this one other student was like, I really like Space Mountain because I'm going into space. It's not that it's a great roller coaster, obviously. We just saw that. It's about the story that we're being told. And so as I started thinking about that, I said, we're doing exactly the same thing to our students sometimes in the classroom. If we just give them a worksheet that's not really connected to something that they believe in, or we don't tell a story with the lesson that we're creating, and it's just like Space Mountain with the lights on. But if we can involve them in a story, root that in an experience, and give them a purpose for wanting to do that, then we can have a real attraction. Disney's figured out that storytelling really makes things magical and meaningful. That's why they're all about creating experiences. If we only teach knowledge, it's all of these isolated dots, facts, and figures that are not easy to remember. But if you've involved something as a part of an experience, then you're going to have all of those dots connected. You're going to remember what things looked like, what they smelled like, what sounds it was that you were hearing as you were going through those experiences. So we have to focus on more of ways that we can do that. In this closing section, I want to pull some ideas from a book that my wife and I wrote with Joe Renzulli. It's published a couple of years ago now at this point, called Using the School-Wide Enrichment Model with Technology. We looked at Renzulli's original enrichment triad model and ways that we can incorporate or integrate technology in each of the three types of learning that he outlined in 1977 in a pretty meaningful way. There are a couple of challenges that we had to overcome in doing this. Number one, we had to figure out how to write a book that was going to withstand the test of time when technology changes every day. So we focused a lot less on the technology and what we could do with technology, or really the kind of thinking behind it. So there's not necessarily, here's how you use this particular app. Instead, it's more, here are things that you could do in order to engage your students. As part of our reinvention of the Type 1 experience, according to Renzulli, we looked a lot at Torrance's incubation model of thinking, and so we pulled some of that piece out. We looked at some of the work of Jerome Bruner and kind of outlined this in three different stages. Stage number one, heightening anticipation. Stage two, stimulating interest. And then stage three, deepening understanding. So we're going to go through each of those stages. I'll give you kind of an example. And then there's going to be one piece where you're going to pull an activity together out of one of these phases. So let's talk about these individually. When you start a lesson, it's the hook. It's that moment in time where you engage your students in what's about to happen. You have to think of ways that you can do that in a very creative, thought-provoking type of way. It's the getting them excited about what's going to come next. I've read a lot about kind of theme park and amusement park design, specifically focusing on roller coaster design, and all of the research that they conduct around that. And so there's been a number of studies that have sort of measured people's anxiety levels on different roller coaster rides. The moment that riders tend to be the most anxious is the moment that they first sit down in the seat and pull down the head restraint or the lap bar. It's not going up the first hill, it's not going down that big hill, it's when they first sit down. Because you've waited in line all that time, or you've got your fast pass, and you're finally on the attraction, and things are about to happen.
Well, there's no getting off.
There's no getting on. It's like the moment of no return. Like, this is about to get real. And so we have to think of ways that we can start getting kids pulled into that. I think that there's a number of great instructional strategies that we've been using for a really long time, through using kind of point to ponder or essential questions, maybe even kind of providing examples and non-examples. It's through providing examples and non-examples. This is the example that I want to give you, and that we're going to build out this afternoon before we leave. It really is kind of comparing that apples and oranges. As we were working on activities for the book, I started thinking about, well, where did I first learn about examples and non-examples? And I was like, yeah, it seems like it's such a logical thing. And then I realized that, I learned about it on the street. And so really it was all about, one of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. As we move into phase 3 of this, then we're really into talking about deepening understanding. So often is the case that we'll provide these incredibly rewarding experiences for our students, but then we just simply run out of time. That we never take the time to ask them those questions to help them unpack their thinking. I can remember multiple times where I would take my kids on field trips, and at the end of the day, we would be rushing to get off of the bus and then back onto the buses, and then we never got to really talk about what it was that they experienced and learned. So as we're creating these experiences, we want to not be that teacher who runs out of time. And so as part of this, we developed a whole series of thinking routines. A lot of them modeled on the visible thinking that was done by Project Zero. Some new ones that we sort of created. And I'm going to share 3 of them with you. If you use the bit.ly link down there at the bottom, then you can access these. They're all created in Google Drive. So you can create a copy of this. You can share it with your students and give them access to that. The first one that I'm going to share here with you is an AEIOU. So after an experience, then you might ask your students to answer these 5 questions. Listing 3 adjectives or adjectives that describe what it is that they learned. Naming an emotion that describes how the experience made them feel. I would be something that they found interesting. O would be telling about something that made them say, oh. And then U is a question that you want to learn more about. Again, no right or wrong way to answer this. Kids can come up definitely with their own 3 adjectives. You are going to say, no, you do not get to feel that way about that experience that you just had. And it just, again, opens up the discussion for ways that they might extend that learning into new avenues and venues. The second one that I'll share with you here is a CSI, color, symbol, and image. And all of these are able to be edited and changed when you use that bit.ly link. It'll prompt you to add this document to your Google Drive folder. And so you can make a copy of that. The first thing, again, after the experience, you might ask them, what color did that experience or that subject that we just learned about, what did that make you feel? Or what color does this remind you of? They can simply click on that, change the color of this shape that's there. Item number 2, for the symbol, if you select the image, or if you right-click on this, then it will prompt you to change the image within that circle. here we're kind of thinking of having students use emojis or icons to represent what it was that they were thinking or feeling about what it was that they just learned. Again, no right or wrong way to do that. And then the third piece, the I, is for image. So this would be something that would be more existing already, the emoji type of thing, versus finding an actual photograph. Whether they're finding that online with an existing photograph, or they're taking a picture to capture their learning or thinking what's going on in that experience. Questions about either one of those?
No. I'm having trouble getting to the link.
So bit.ly/SAM-tech-CSI. I'll also link these directly on our website so that you don't have to remember that bit again. One last one that we put together here was centered around hexagonal thinking and looking for relationships between things. This one I think is a little bit more complex in its nature. So each of these dozen or so hexagons, when you open it up in Google Drive, is a separate cell. So you would be able to click on this, type in text or words, and then all of these, because they're separate, can be rearranged on the page, on the sheet. So the idea is that you would kind of brainstorm these 10 to 12 different things that you've learned or big ideas, and then you would rearrange the hexagons to show how they're related to one another. If they're not related at all, then they might be on two opposite sides of the page. But if they're connected to at least one or two or three other pieces, then you would want to put them next to one another, having those multiple points of connection, which is really a pretty interesting way to get kids to format what it is that's going on inside of their head and seeing what's there within this digital form.
Did you have a picture of these? Is it in a discussion online, or how would you have them share these?
Yeah, so we've had them kind of do them individually, or even like within a small group, and then kind of discuss them as a group or as a whole class. You could link these to like a common Google Doc, and then they could just kind of post that so that you can see all of them. So a lot of different ways that you can share those. Also done this with like a whole class, like a whole group, where everybody sort of chose one big idea, and then related them together. So 12 of you, 12 hexagons, we could show how those might be related or not related. Right. So I want to have you try using one of these pieces. So this is your turn. So if you go to bit.ly/TFI-1, you will see a link to, you will be connected to a Google presentation. You may think about doing this together, especially people that are not on a computer. So it's going to be much easier on a computer. If you're on an iPad, then you should install the Google Slides app if that's not already on your iPad or your tablet device. So what I did was to just create 20 blank pages. So you're going to choose one of these pages that somebody is not already on. You can tell somebody is on that page because it will show a little symbol here or a color, like right now somebody's on number 17. That's the anonymous narwhal. And there's the anonymous, I don't even know what that is. So what I want you to do is to create your own one of these things that's not like the other. So within this, just follow the directions that are there. You're going to select the image by clicking on the image. You can right click or control click to activate the menu. Or copy and paste the URL from there. So you're looking for 4 different things that you're going to put in there based maybe upon something that you're interested in. Looking for one thing that is not necessarily like the others. Related or not related.
For obvious reasons, you would think that the bottom left one, that was like a circle. But but it's there for a reason. I know that it's important to the whole group.
That is not the one.
I just can't put my finger on it.
But that represents the eye. So the ever-present eye that's watching the women and comes up multiple times throughout the novel.
Is it the eagle or?
Do you want to give us
The eagle represents freedom, so that was one of the things they were searching for.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I was thinking totally with my students in mind, because they've been
Yeah.
in the novel.
Absolutely. And so, so then the one that you were thinking of there would
It's
not.
the woman with strength, because they're powerless in the society.
Right.
Hmm.
Nice. And here we have our butterflies. And tell us about this.
Well, okay, so you want us to tell, are they gonna guess which one doesn't really belong, or? 'Cause
No,
we made it a little
just in the interest of time, let's
Okay.
just go ahead and
Well,
reveal.
we kind of tried to make it a little tricky. It's like, so
Okay.
if you didn't know about butterflies, you wouldn't know. But the monarch butterfly is the one that doesn't belong because it's the only one who migrates, top left.
The top left.
But we also were gonna say that the top right could be the one that doesn't belong because it's only swallowtail,
Ah.
or it's also the only one that's not orange.
Uh-huh.
Or the bottom left could be the only one that doesn't belong because it's the only one that mimics another butterfly. It's the, mimics the monarch butterfly.
Looking at it really from multiple perspectives and
Mhm.
saying, oh, this could be a pattern, or maybe it's that this one doesn't belong. And I think that as we were kind of putting this activity together, that's really what we wanted to encourage the students to look at and realize that there are these multiple perspectives, and depending on what your rule is,
Mhm.
then you might have multiple correct answers.
Are there more templates with this?
Yeah, so I made this one, and then the other three that I showed you work exactly the same way. And tell us about this one. We've got horses.
So first of all, Russian trying to get something done,
Yeah.
but, so patterns,
Mhm.
texture,
Yeah.
living things versus man-made.
Mhm. So lots of different ways that we can go with that. And a couple others that we'll do here. About this one.
So we were thinking about, you could do photographs taken during World War One. You could also think about technologies invented during World War One. So we were just kind of looking at that.
It's cool.
So this is ours,
Uh-huh.
and we came up with like an 80s thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they may look completely different, but if a person was, born in that era and raised in that era, you would see that these are all important things that occurred, important as individuals, inventions, because the Rubik's Cube was big, or a fashion statement, because, the members' own jacket was big, and they're back again.
They are back, yeah.
Back.
It's like every few years, and
Yes.
somehow both of those things come back in style. And you can certainly kind of say, oh, well, this is, the one that doesn't belong. And then, a math example. So tell us about this.
Well, there's really two that are debatable, so the corners on the top left and right, their functions. If the kids don't know what to ask them, so they'll ask about the one on the right. But they could say the one that doesn't belong is f of x because it's not correct.
Right.
But really, the one that doesn't belong is the bottom left-hand corner, because each x value cannot have more than one point if it's a function. So the answer should be the one on the left, but they can make a case for the top of it.
Just like as we saw with the selfie example, then you can make a case for any one of those. I like this as an activity, not only just from a teacher standpoint, or perhaps more importantly from a student standpoint, because they really have to examine those relationships between the items and articles that they're inserting within the template. So this gives them another way to go about kind of being curious and developing each of their areas of interest. Let me provide you with a little bit of closure here as I send you off on your way. As Robert said, we will follow up through the Attendify app. So probably at some point early next week, I'll just kind of send out a general discussion prompt or say, hey, thanks for being so awesome today. And then I would love to hear what it is that you, how you share this information with other teachers and with your students. So, as we started out today, we talked about the importance of staying hungry and staying foolish. So hopefully you've gotten a lot of new ideas or things that you might want to do with your students in order to help them stay hungry and stay foolish. You also need to keep in mind that curiosity does not have to kill the cat. That curiosity is something that is really very important. And in the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, she said that, I think in a child's birth, if a mother could ask a fairy godmother to endow it with the most useful gift, that gift should be curiosity.
Sorry, I was gonna say too, that the curiosity killed the cat is only half of that phrase,
Exactly.
but satisfaction brought it back. And so I think that's the other part, to sort of bookend it with that, using that same phraseology, so.
Yeah, precisely. So we need to kind of keep those pieces definitely in mind, that it doesn't have to end with a dead cat. So often our kids, our students, especially some of our brightest kids, hear the word stop a lot. Stop asking questions, stop reading ahead in the book, stop using their technology. I think that the more that they hear that word stop, then the less that they want to go forth and take those chances that will lead them to creativity. So instead of saying stop, I hope that I've given you some ideas that will help give your kids and yourself the green light. With infinite access to information and content through technology, we need to look for ways that we should engage and empower our students to think deeply, get deeply involved in solving problems and investigating their own interest over long periods of time. So instead of saying stop all the time, let's say go. Go. Embrace the final frontier. For it is endless waiting. Seek, contact, explore, and travel the vast galaxy and go where no person has gone before. Or in the words of that eternal optimist, Buzz Lightyear, go to infinity